Okay.
Good morning. This is Martin Comtois, MC Starman, and we're doing a recording. We're trying something new here. I have my friend Luke Renda with me. Hey, Luke.
Hey, Martin.
How you doing, man?
Yeah, pretty good.
So today is the 9th of October, 2021, and it's a triple conjunction of Sun, Mercury, retrograde, and Mars. And as you were saying, pointing out before we started recording, that this is a great time to start new things. So we're starting something new and doing it on this very important astrological event, and doing a little smudge here to sanctify our endeavor. So Luke, maybe you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Well, my name's Luke Renda, and I'm trying to make some videos out there for people to just help them get the tools that they need to cope with the stress of our times, and hopefully help them individuate and persevere, because things are tough out there.
Cool. And so we're going to be sharing these videos on both of our platforms. What is the name of your platform?
My channel is called Feel the Link, and Feel the Link. And I called it that because when I was reading Carl Jung and I was reading these different authors, there was like this link that sort of wove through their work, even though a lot of people wouldn't put these different authors together because they do have differences. But I found that the similarities with the plight of the individual was so strong in their work that I thought I had to bring these authors together.
How cool, how cool. And then for those on your channel, my channel is The Healer and the Dreamer Astrology. It's a Jungian perspective to astrology, the healer and the dreamer being an archetypal conception of the sun and the moon, the sun being the healer and the moon being the dreamer. So it's a symbolic perspective, and it really deals with the changes that we're seeing in the archetypes at that time. At this time, you know, we've been a patriarchal society, and then we're trying to shift into a more matriarchal and patriarchal. I call it the Sisyarchal society, where we honor both the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine. And so the healer and the dreamer, mostly so far on my site, I've put astrological material. I do new moon and full moon reports and different astrological reports, but I also have some playlist on dreams, and I have some workshops on there. And this workshop that we're working on is going to be a new playlist on my channel. So this is something that I've been wanting to do a lot now, is co-creations, you know, working together. And so it's really cool to be working with you, Luke.
Yeah, it's going to be great, I think. I've only put a couple videos up on my channel so far, but I plan to do more. But when you get that flow together with another person, that's when the magic really happens, I think, and you can get really some gold coming out of it. So I'm really happy to be working with you too.
Cool, cool. And you know quite a bit about astrology too. Me and you have been working on astrology for quite a while. What's your how's your studies going?
They're going good. I've kind of diverged into other things, right? I was getting into Jung and some other psychologists and stuff like that. But I'm planning on getting back into it to sort of hone in, because I'm like a bit of a Capricorn, so I gotta kind of, the victories are hard won. If I'm not grinding hard on it and spending a lot of time just like getting through it and just focusing in on my studies and re-going over those studies, that I feel I don't have as much confidence as some people who just, you know, go through the work and read a handful of books and they kind of just get it. For me, it's a hard won victory.
Hmm. Interesting, because I have Saturn in Capricorn on in a conjunction with the midheaven. So
Oh, nice.
the Saturnian taskmaster. So I maybe our my son at what degree is your son?
It's 16 degrees, I'm pretty sure. 16
Okay,
or 18 degrees.
okay. Mine is at 6. My Saturn is at 6 degrees, so a wide conjunction of the sun and and um and Saturn in Capricorn. So we're both pretty driven, and I really look forward to doing this exchange with you. And we'll talk some astrology too, but um, mm, we'll talk, Jungian. But then you have a lot of studies in different psychologists, so you'll bring all kinds of quotes to the material. We're going to be covering the undiscovered self. If you want to
Oh,
follow it
nice.
with us, get you that little book, the undiscovered self. It comes in a paperback edition, and it's not too expensive. And then we're going to be going through chapter after chapter, 1 week at a time. I think we're going to meet on Sundays and post our videos. And we're also going to welcome questions. So if you have questions, write them as a comments, and the week after, we're going to be covering your questions as well. And so The Undiscovered Self by Carl Jung is this first study that we're going to be doing. When did you, I mean, this is a powerful essay, but when did you come to Jung? And when did your Jungian studies start?
You know what is kind of funny? It started, Young kind of sent me on a path that led me through. So I was in, I think, grade 10, grade 11 psychology, and I
Oh,
did an
wow.
essay on Carl Jung. And there was a quote in there that said, he said something like, in order to understand the human being and the individual, he said it's like it's in their blood. Like you have to know where this person has come from. And in my mind, I had a flash of like the Great Pyramids of Giza. And I was like, I have to study the oldest civilizations in the world. And so Jung sent me on probably 10 or 15 years of studying ancient Sumer, Babylon, Egypt, ancient Ireland, and then it led me to Manly P. Hall and all these occult studies. And that kind of led me back around to Jung, uh, with The Undiscovered Self, actually. Probably about 10 years ago is when I first read that book, and I was floored by it because it was all about the plight of the individual and versus the collective, and how to sort of shore yourself up as an individual so that you're not overwhelmed by these sort of collective forces. And
Far
I
out,
thought, wow, man, I couldn't believe it.
far out, far out. What
Yeah,
a nice
so it was a
story.
long process back to Jung, but he was the one that kind of started me off, which is so funny that I'm into him a lot now, going through
Right.
his collective works and stuff. So
Cool, cool. It's far out to hear that, huh? And Jung makes a big impact on our studies, huh? The Undiscovered Self itself is probably one of his most famous essays, and just because he talks about this, and I think it's really relevant with our times. What we're going through is understanding, terms like mass man and the mass psychosis also he introduces in that essay. Myself, I came to Jung um, indirectly, although I guess when I was a teenager too, I was reading the I Ching by Wilhelm, and I didn't know it at the time, but the introduction was done by Carl Jung, and the Wilhelm edition of the I Ching, and I didn't speak English at the time. I just did the I Ching, because it was, and so only till later. But I started being an astrologer, studying astrology when I was 28, and then but I studied Liz Green, and Liz Green is a Jungian analyst. We all know. Really, we both study Liz Green, and but not till I jumped into being an astrologer full time did I see the need to develop my practice of studying Jung, I found that practicing, being in analysis, doing readings, I could bring people to catharsis really easy. The chart really brings about, the psychological structure of the individual. And through the analysis of the chart, you can come to a point where the person understands what the problem is, and that usually causes a catharsis. And so I found myself bringing people to the point of catharsis, and I found the experience to be really moving for me as well. But I felt like I didn't know what to do after that. And so then in analysis, I would just bring out all kinds of important information, but to synthesize it and to help people move forward once they understand what the problem is. So you can just imagine what kind of crisis that created in me. It threw me into depression, and then I figured, oh, I need some help. And so then I started devouring Jung's work to help me. And then my practice really shifted. And then I started introducing dream work to my astrology practice. And that really shifted. And then when I read Mysterium Conjunctionis, then I was introduced to a whole different perspective of astrology, the alchemical perspective, which is the healer and the dreamer was born out of that. So and then we became friends early in my process. I've been a practicing astrologer for 13 years, and we've been friends for what, 8-9 years?
Yeah, 7 or 8 years, I think so. And so when I first met you, you were giving a presentation at that music festival,
Right.
and you told me about The Dreamer and the Vine by Liz Green, her novel,
Right.
and The Astrology of Fate. And then so I went through a few Liz Green books, those two in particular, and I think Saturn, A New Look at an Old Devil. And then I contacted you maybe 2 years later after that. And then you were telling me about Carl Jung. We did some readings together. And at that time, I'd only read The Undiscovered Self and a few of the other small essays that he'd done. And you were like, get into the collected works. And so I read like The Development of Personality and Archetypes of the Collective Unconscious. And so you're the one that kind of got me into studying Jung more deeply. Whereas, I didn't even know about these collective works. Now I have a bunch of them, and there's a lot to go through. But it's very helpful. He has a lot of digressions, and it kind of shows his process, which some people might not like that, but I find reading through his process helps me understand his work a bit more too, right? So
well, Mary Louise von Franz, one of Jung's major followers, uh, in her biography of Jung, she talks about how Jung, most writer will go straight to the point, or will express what they think, and that's their conclusion. Jung approaches subject matter by circumambulating it, she says. He turns around it and he shares his ideas, but ultimately he leaves you with a sense of having to do the work of deciding. Jung never, says this is it. Jung says you have a relationship with the unconscious, you develop your relationship with the unconscious, and that becomes it. And so she says Jung always resisted, what I call the Messiah complex. He didn't want to become, the guru. He just wanted you to find your own guru, just like he did in the black books and the red books. He found a Philemon in his own practice, and Philemon became his guru, and so in that sense, Jung gave us a scientific means of approaching the self. And so his concepts are not straight out outlined. they are hinted about and in a circumambulatory way. He does a mandala and he lets you, and so in that sense, reading Jung, I think it requires a tremendous amount of moral and intellectual integrity and courage too, because it's not easy, because he puts you through a lot emotionally. But as we go along with it, um, in our studies of Jung, it becomes more and more relevant, and it comes to a point, some people can't get into it because his language is so difficult. But if you have the courage intellectually and morally to do the work while you're reading, Jung can take you on an amazing way towards discovering, what we call the higher self or the self. Do you have similar experiences?
Yeah, well, that's what people maybe don't like about him as much, is because they just want like the answers. And what he does is, by showing his own process of coming to these conclusions, what he's trying to get you to do is to set foot on your own path. Not like it's like the chariot card of the major arcana, right? It's like the chariot goes in the ruts of the other carts, right? Like it doesn't strike out on its own path, kind of thing, right? And that's what he wants you to do. He doesn't want you to follow his path. He's done his groundwork, but he wants you to strike out on your own path, come to your own conclusions, find your own methods, right, for yourself, not just completely follow everything that he did for himself. Because a lot of what he laid out was his own process and his own demons and dealing with, Protestantism and all of that stuff, right, with his past. And so he almost wants you to make your own red book, I feel like, you know what I mean?
Absolutely, absolutely. And our studies will get into that and we'll talk about it. And wow, and then I think that so far, people that are tuning in here are being well introduced to, who you are and who I am. Let's talk a little bit about the undiscovered self and the impact that it had on you. You say it was one of the first books that you read. Personally, I've read it probably 6 times, and I have, my favorite quote, and I'll be sharing that with you. But what do you feel that book contributed to you, and what can it contribute, to someone who's starting to read Jung, who has been into Jung? And again, this is the little book. Order it, and then we'll be meeting every week. And so we look at this kind of as a study group in a sense, and so what was the influence that the Undiscovered Self had for you?
Well, it made me feel secure in being an individual and being sort of outside. Colin Wilson, he calls it the outsider, like you're this outsider. And a lot of the geniuses people were coming out, right? Like they were the outsider. They were outcasts of their community, but they were the ones that came up with these great inventions, and they came up with all of these things that we still use today, like Goodyear tire, right? That guy was an outsider. He created vulcanized rubber. He was like a pariah in his town. When his son died, he had to drag him into the woods and bury him himself. These people wouldn't help him, yet this guy changed the lives of everyone on the planet. And that's kind of, it's like this outsider mentality. I always felt like, oh, why can't I get along more in groups? Why don't I fit in more? And Jung really made me feel like you don't need to. You don't need to. Keep shoring yourself up. Eventually, you will come into a community of other individuals rather than sort of dissolve myself into a collective. And when I read it again 6 years ago, this was before our current crisis of times, I was like, oh man, this is so amazing. Again, like I wanted to share it with my other friends and sort of be like, hey, look at this. Like, you think society's kind of crazy? Like, check out what Jung said. And that was the second time I read it. And then during our current crisis, I read it again. And now I'm going through it again here with you. But every time I read it, it's like, it's more poignant than it was the first time.
How cool, how cool. Beautiful, beautiful. I was when you were saying that about the story. I mean, that's the story of so many people, just like Copernicus, the Copernican revolution, Tycho Brahe, Kepler, these guys all felt on the edge like that. And you were mentioning that book about Nostradamus, by Liz Green, The Keeper of the Vine. There's something, about being the keeper of wisdom that kind of leaves you aside from the collective. And, that's the place of the sage. That's the place of, Saturn, right? Saturn's got hooves, and he's got this cloak, and he's got, horns and long hair, and and then he looks like the devil in some sense, but he carries the torch of knowledge. And so far out, nice story. So let's share a quote. I'm gonna so for those who are watching, please do get the book, and then we'll take you through it. We'll do some quotes on it, and we'll discuss it every week. Just feeling pretty good, huh, Luke?
Yeah, it's flowing good.
Really nicely flowing. So this is an alchemical picture. We have the anima mundi, the soul of the world, within the 7 layers, and the planetary archetypes, and the zodiacal signs. And so Jung had so many beautiful alchemical pictures in his work. And so in my work, I've been kind of collecting these images. So here's the quote, and to me, this is one of my favorite quotes. So, a mood of universal destruction and renewal has set its mark on our age. And so, what is that, saying? And so, so what is that saying? To me, that's the in one of my other favorite quotes from Jung is in volume 10 of the Collected Works, when Jung talks about the age of Aquarius and pain of renewal that takes place at a change of age. So this is what he refers to as set its mark on our age. We are in a shifting. This mood makes itself felt everywhere, politically, socially, and philosophically. We are living in what the Greeks called the kairos, the right moment for a metamorphosis of the gods, of the fundamental principles and symbols. So that other quote that I'm referring to, he talks about a shift in archetypal dominance or psychic dominance. There's something shifting in all of us. We are becoming different, and that's really the fundamentals of who we are shifting, and that's deeply painful. This peculiarity of our time, which is certainly not of our conscious choosing, is the expression of the unconscious human within us who is changing. Coming generations will have to take account of this momentous transformation if humanity is not to destroy itself through the might of its own technology and science. So much is at stake, and so much depends on the psychological constitution of the modern human. That is from the Undiscovered Self.
Beautiful.
It's not it kind of summarizes the whole essay, and we'll get into it in details. So how can people contact you, and how can people, so what was your link again? I mean, your channel again?
It's called Feel the Link.
Feel the Link.
Yeah, and I only have a couple videos up there so far, but I'm planning on to do another one this weekend, which should bring about a few tools that people can use, writing exercises and stuff like that. And yeah, you can just leave a comment or an email and get back to me. I can get back to you, or
In our next presentation, we'll have little slides that I can introduce, that I can share to people with our information in more details. So what were you going to be offering in your channel?
Mostly just bringing to light a lot of thinkers that maybe have not even crossed people's paths, great thinkers of the past that, yeah, they're not being pushed out. Like even Carl Jung, they're not being pushed out there anymore. People, I talk to child psychologists and I talk to, early childhood educators, and I'll bring up some of the most famous child psychologists and they'll be like, who's that? And they just went to school for 6, 7 years. They have no idea what I'm talking about when I bring up Melanie Klein or Alice Miller or any of these people that are like, they're the top highest brow out there for this type of stuff. So, and like my next video is on Dr. Nathaniel Brandon, and I mix them with Manly P. Hall. I kind of mix together different thinkers and different researchers that maybe people hadn't put together themselves, but it's mostly focusing on the individual. How can the individual help himself out? And I actually have a quote here that is from the Undiscovered Self that kind of matches up with this. If you don't mind, I can read it.
Sure, please.
There is and can be no self-knowledge based on theoretical assumptions, for the object of this knowledge is an individual, a relative exception, and an irregular phenomenon.
Yeah, Jung really empowers the individual. And that was beautiful what you were saying about, I'm okay with being an individual. And so Jung is huge in that, especially as we become all overwhelmed by this collective psychosis that's going on. My work is a little bit more developed. I've been only doing my video channel for about a year, a little bit more than a year. And I post regularly. So please tune in. Support our channels. If you follow our channel, if you comment, if you put reactions, if you share, it helps us grow. And I look forward to working with you, Luke, on this and the Undiscovered Self. So beautiful. Thank you for your time, and let's do this.
Yeah, for sure. Can I say one more thing before we go?
Sure.
So that quote that you read from Jung, like he's talking about, you mentioned it before, it's like the birth pains of a new age that we're going through, right? It's like the
Right.
labor of birthing this new age, and that's the struggle we're going through right now, right? Like the archetypes are changing and everything, and it seems crazy out there, and that's why you gotta show yourself up as an individual, because it's the Nostradamus at the well. He's helping people with the plague. He's trying to help them, stay clean, stay home, just chill out, like. And he says, you know what? I can't help these people. They're going mad. So he goes, and this is from the movie in the 90s. He goes to the center of town. He strips down naked, and he washes himself at the well. And it's like the metaphor for like, hey, everyone's losing it, but I'm gonna stay sane. I'm gonna
How
stay
sweet.
clean.
How sweet. That's powerful, man. That's
Yeah,
really
yeah.
powerful. And as you were saying that, I was reflecting to our to our time in the sun there in at the Quadripalooza 7, 8 years ago, and how you were so wrapped in attention, and how we became friends at that time. And then now 7 years later, 8 years later, we're working together. This is so exciting.
Great. You got to follow those synchronicities, right? Everything happens in life and it's showing you these signs, and you just got to follow them. And everything in my life has been a synchronicity after synchronicity, and I've just paid attention to them and followed up on them, and things just work out when you do that. You know what I mean? The universe has its way of having things work out. It's like the Wu Wei, throw away the oars and the river will take you where you need to go.
How beautiful. Well, this is really exciting. I really had a good time today, and I'm glad that it was kind of just a spur of the moment thing. We were inspired, and on this Mercury, Sun, Mars conjunction, it's a great time to commit and to engage and to share our wisdom. So thank you, brother, for your time, and thank you everyone that's tuned in and followed us all this long video. And you can see that we're going to be able to have some really meaningful conversations. It's been absolutely delightful, Luke.
Yeah, cheers, Martin. Same to you. Don't forget to follow the Healer and the Dreamer astrology page.
Yes, and feel the link. All right, we're done. Over
right.
and out. Whoop, whoop, whoop. MC Starman and Luke Renda's in the house.
Right on.